Michelle will be doing attendance. She's not here. Michelle Swanson will be doing attendance. She's not here today, but she's going to be using the owl to do attendance and to do the minutes, as well as the minutes from the meeting the other day. The meeting minutes from both August 30th and September 27th have been on the website for a while. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review. Are there any motions to edit or approve? First, starting with August 30th.
I'll make a motion to approve the August 30th minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. September 27th. Is there a motion to edit or approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. If anyone has had an opportunity to look at the agenda, are there any requests to amend the agenda? There is no public in attendance, so I expect there is no public comment unless, Ed, you see anyone that's on. Okay,
We're the only one on the meeting.
perfect. The only correspondence I can recall was somehow Michelle mentioned that people had suggested shade, and I'm not sure what form that came in, whether it was verbal or whatever, but let's just talk about that.
So I was very pleased one day when I went out for a walk to North Point, and there were two couples using the picnic tables right inside the North Point. They had taken different paths and they were all gathering there, so they were being used. And they just mentioned, shade also. We do have a canopy, but it doesn't, it works pretty well, but it doesn't it's only one thing that we move constantly. So it was just the idea, also in the back of North Point, the non-pavilion picnic table, the round one there, we use that during some of our events, and that got pretty heated too. So we had the little butterflies went to Mexico. That was Mexico, and they were boiling out there. And so the suggestion was we do an event and we use that table again, we should use some shade. So I just looked into it because actually a shade area canopy of some kind was brought up a long time ago. And so I got the price, and the price for putting in a 20 by 30 4-post, metal post with the real, I don't know how to describe it other than it's an actual park
The shade structure. I
shade
think
structure is about 8,000.
With a canvas top or a metal top or?
It's not, it's that fabric. I actually can, okay, I broke my computer yesterday, so I am.
Well, that's okay, because I mean, we'll include costs and
Yeah.
such if the
So
group
I was
wants to
gonna-
include
yeah.
that in the budget.
Right, so I threw it in the budget.
Okay,
Is the point. And we've got a lot of other things going on. This would be something, these are companies we've dealt with in the past. So Kirby Built is who we bought these signs right out here from, where you put the bulletin boards. So it would be an easy thing.
And I can try to find out, because Manistee put some of those shade structures at Fifth Avenue Beach. Might be the same company, but might not be. I can try to find out who they got them from, if there's different vendor that. might have
Yeah, there's a lot of
pricing.
companies out there because through my membership in National Parks and Recreation Association, I get actually a vendor book every year, and there's national ones. Probably, I don't do a lot of them.
so this would be permanent.
It would be permanent, so it would be year round. It could also, take care of some rain. If we were doing a program out there and there was rain. We're kind of leaning towards that front area there being a gathering space, not just for events, but also for anyone who wants to go for a picnic. And, Paul and I have talked about not putting stuff all through the park, but that front area right there is becoming, more used, not just by events, but also by people. And it wouldn't be nice to actually have, we've expanded the picnic capability of the garden. This just takes North Points to another level by providing some kind of cover.
Is that where the dog watering thing is gonna be also, or no?
Well, the dog watering thing is not on the radar for this budget year. It'll be
Okay.
2026.
Oh, okay.
That's actually in my discussion there.
So for the budget this year, it's not just gonna be, numbers on the page. It's gonna be more of a, we're gonna have more narrative and some pictures and it's just, we're gonna take it up a level just so it's a more useful document for the public. So I think I would look to Vic and particularly you to help with that narrative for some of the stuff that the parks are doing and things like that. And I think it'll just be a better document. It's kind of what they do in bigger cities and stuff, and what I'm used to doing, and I'd like to kind of bring that here, because I think it's better for the residents to see that.
Is there a way that that could actually be incorporated into the budget as like a memo? Because what I struggle with, when I made the submissions and had all the narratives, I have all my spreadsheets, and then the budget gets presented, and the numbers are different. And they're different because only some of the things got approved, and I'm always trying to marry them back and forth. Do you have?
Yeah, we can take that after the meeting, I'll show.
Okay, great.
Morning, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
Sorry.
That's
My
okay.
tardiness.
That's okay. All right, anything else on that?
No, so that was the correspondence.
And this can stay up year round?
Yes. I mean, if you, I mean, we can put one up on the screen, but I mean, is this the time to actually go?
Well, I guess the only thing I would ask people to consider is we have a lady from DNR coming in at 9:30 to present for 30 minutes on some of the opportunities that we have. And we are gonna talk about budget. Last year, we didn't have a November meeting because it's right at Thanksgiving, which is the same time this year. So we need to talk about, do we have a meeting that week or reschedule it? I'm thinking that since we really haven't talked about budget, don't have a lot of time to get into it extensively today, maybe we should have another meeting, even if it's a remote meeting. But we really need to get into
There
it.
you go.
Withdraw the question.
So I chose the 20 by 30, if you go up a little bit more. I think it's the green one there in the middle row, but you get the basic idea.
Are there ones with permanent structures so you don't have the maintenance?
This is permanent.
Even the canvas top?
That is my understanding from what I read.
Okay, interesting.
It does talk about it takes two people to assemble it in the first place.
No, it's set.
Okay,
It's set in the
mine
ground,
was
right?
8,000, so I don't know where they're getting, the fancier shapes get more expensive.
Wow.
Yeah, well, okay,
Yeah, but you get the idea, that's,
Okay.
yeah, I'd have to,
and there's probably other vendors too, but
Yes.
I'll find out what Manistee has and just for a reference point, but
yeah.
I think they keep theirs up year round. We're just-
So, well, I'll save it to the budget discussion, because I have more thoughts on that.
Okay.
I do get correspondence a lot asking to rent a pavilion, which of course the township doesn't have. But now we would actually have something where people wanted to have, we had a wedding, for example, last year. So if we start to do things like that, we need to think about where does this take us?
Would we ever be interested in renting a pavilion? Would that be a more trouble than it's worth, or would it be worth doing something
We
like
do
that?
it at the city for the Lions main pavilion, and it's an effort. I mean,
It is.
unless we get a lot of demand for that, I think you just do first come, first served,
Okay.
probably, but I mean, you can always look at it.
All right, as I mentioned, Jeremy Cleary's here at 9:30. Village Township joint efforts, guys, anything to report? I mean, we
Well,
know.
mine's probably a little different
Go ahead.
from yours, and mine is that I did put out there an opportunity to have a nice joint effort between the village and the township's recreation mind, not the trails. And that is an event the day of the grand opening of the new pavilion. I was suggesting that earlier in the day, we have some kind of family event that geared, I call it a children's festival. Made up a flyer and threw like a lot of stuff on there. I always over ask in the beginning. And the feedback I got was basically keep us in the loop. Because I think a lot of energy is being spent elsewhere, plus there's an election.
Yeah.
And so we don't necessarily know who is going to be in what position post-election. And so my thought, I also reached out to the PLA, and the PLA said they couldn't take it on, but if somebody else was taking it on, that they could be supportive, perhaps financially and maybe volunteers, although, you get the same 10 people. But, so what I decided is if after the election, there is someone on the parks from the village side that's willing to give any effort, that I would take that on and I'll scale it to the volunteers available. And so that's where I'm at with that my effort to do something jointly.
Okay.
I know, John, you've been working diligently on a bigger project.
Yeah, the trails and, or,
Well, we'll talk about the
Yeah.
trails. I was expecting Rick to be here, but we can get to that. It's on the agenda.
Is that festival scheduled, or your thought would be at the village park? With
At the
new-
village park, under the pavilion,
with the new pavilion.
yeah.
When is that pavilion gonna be installed?
Okay, so I can give you a quick update on that. We have had to spend some time with the Manistee County Community Foundation reconciling exactly how the budget for the new pavilion matches up against the $100,000 grant that they gave us. And we just got an email this morning that I was copied on that says that's all been resolved and everything is now copacetic between the Manistee County Community Foundation and the village.
Right.
So it's getting late. And I had expected this to be done by now. But I expected to see the demolition of the old pavilion and the placement of the new slab with the anchor points for the new pavilion installed in that slab. And that would sit there all winter long. And in the late March, early April timeframe, the new pavilion would be built. Not seen that demolition occur. It's now the end of October. The gales of November are gonna start blowing. So I'm not sure we're gonna get that fall work accomplished. Do I think that's a problem in having that pavilion for next summer? Absolutely not. But it gives me pause in predicting a date when we could do your project. But I would anticipate that worst case scenario, the pavilion is done and ready to go late May, early June. And that's the best window I can give you at this point.
Is the delay just getting people to do the work, or is it funding, or?
Part of the delay was getting these numbers right between the I don't know how to explain this, but it is a very convoluted process that this budget has to go through between approval at the village council level, and then it has to be approved by the advisory board to the Manistee County Community Foundation. And then the Manistee County Community Foundation Board has to approve distribution of the money. It's getting the presentation to the Manistee County Community Foundation Board in perfect order.
Yeah.
That's caused this little hiccup in the flow of the money. And so that's where we are.
Okay.
Rick joined at 8:40. If you want to add that, so Michelle knows that.
Okay. All right, Michelle, anything on, history, or education?
Just really quick, after 2 years, I got the first plaque submitted. I did, take the liberty of asking their creative director to take a look at it because in the end, I wasn't confident with my design work. So we had a budget of 1,900. I would assume that they're gonna charge something for this extra work, but since we have the 6,000, I figured that would be okay, knowing that this is the template for which all other plaques will be modeled after. I thought it should be someone who does this for a living, designing it.
Which one is it?
Johnson sign, oh, the first one is Macbeth,
Macbeth, okay.
yeah. And the next one up will be the thrift shop. And I'll be beginning that probably November, December. And
I
it's for
set up
history.
that-
They are gonna start meeting out of a home instead of here at the township. They have not had overwhelming attendance. And even I haven't been able to attend. But they are continuing to look at separating and creating a 501(c)(3). As far as education, Jean and I have been ongoing talking about what's going on, and Jean met with Catherine from the Conservation District because she's taking over on the children's science education, and I think they're gonna collaborate. That'll be great. And yeah, that's it.
Who is on the history ad hoc committee? It's Jean and.
Well, so there's not
Lori.
really, when you say top committee, the two people who consistently show up are Laura Lee, Matthew Ryan, and Kathy Sear. And then Ellen Somsel is a pretty regular, and me. They do submit minutes, which I think I forwarded to you, but they wouldn't really be of interest. It's one of the things, I don't know how to really handle it. But so they do keep minutes, they keep track of who attends and who doesn't. We have a lot of people who say that they're part of it, but don't show up to meetings. So now they're trying to rethink, do we need to have meetings monthly?
And I know you had asked that I get a hold of Laura, Lee, which I haven't. Are we now maybe thinking we should keep that money to fund more signs as stuff goes along rather than try to
Well,
fund this?
that is a conversation that should be had by people beyond just me, because when people say every other town has a history museum or a history group, it's pretty accurate. I mean, even Marilla has their own, right? And Onekama has a splendid history, but it's been finding people to consistently show up to work that, and that has been the challenge. So kind of a long answer to, the signs are important, but when we're thinking about the next generation, there's a lot of history being lost as we speak. Because people who are in their 80s and even 90s, you know, are starting to pass, and their archival elements, you know, they have postcards, they have this, that, the other, they're gonna be lost. So while the signs are important and kind of they have a distinct beginning and end, I can do this project. The whole idea of having a history group had support off and on for decades. And so we thought that maybe this money would push us over the edge and allow them to establish a 501c3. Although that's a variance of opinion between the group that's kind of the core group, whether we need to depart from the township or not. So that's a higher level
So
discussion.
it's just sitting there waiting then. I'm gonna just not do anything.
I'm
until you
sorry,
guys
but
figure it out.
yeah, I don't have a clear
Were you
answer.
able to connect with Gail Verplank or somebody?
I connected with so many.
Okay.
Did I get through to Gail Verplank? I can't recall.
Cause she's the one who did the Wellspring.
Yeah.
You know what? I passed her number on to Laura Lee because Laura
Okay.
Lee contacted the school.
Okay.
That's right, because she wasn't signed, I've been working.
Cause I talked to her and said she might be getting a call from somebody, so I just didn't
Yes.
know if you guys have connected. her.
Laura Lee's interested in
Okay.
that.
Michelle, I got a quick question.
Yes,
Did you say that there's standards for the sign? Is that just related to the historical signs?
well, I think I know where you're going, but yes, what I was saying is the historical plaques, not to be confused with the state's history plaques. Our local plaques we're gonna follow a template for those that go on the buildings that are historical.
Gotcha,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. So it's the
And
plaques
they
that are,
do,
the plaques, it's not a sign, the plaques have a standard.
they're going to have a standard is the point.
Okay.
Yes, we did use the Onekama font, but since it's laser etched on silver, there won't be any colors. But we did use, when it says Onekama at the top, it's the same font that we use for Onekama on the signage around town.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, moving on to wetlands. I think, Ed, we just haven't been able to get the guy from Consumers to respond, right?
I need to follow up again with them. Yeah, it's like Eric, I think is really busy and.
Yeah. But that's our only open item, I think. I mean, of course, they're interested in the Trails project too, so we can keep them up on that, but I don't have anything else with respect to the wetlands. On communication, John, hope maybe that after the meeting, you can give me a little bit of clarity on, well, maybe clarity, help me better understand the lack of clarity that you had with respect to FOIA when you were looking at it last month. You'd mentioned that at the last meeting, and I just haven't had time to deal with it. So separately, we can just talk about that.
Well, sadly, I'm gonna have to go back and remember what it was I was asking.
Well, what you had said was, you know, the only thing that you had some lack of clarity on was how FOIA was being presented on the web. And I hadn't really done anything other than respond to FOIA requests.
Okay,
So, and I know that if you go out to the website, you can see there's an area on the website where you can get you click the button for FOIA. So that's, I guess, how they submit them. I didn't, in any of my updates, say this is a response to a FOIA. I just put it out there,
got it.
advised the person who requested it, and they said to me they were satisfied. So,
Okay, great.
Mr. Mann hasn't been able to attend for the last 2 months, and apparently has not had a chance to review that. So, Paul, your turn. If you,
No, I'm up next.
November's Mueller.
No,
Isn't it?
that looks like Urban November.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Madden October. No, you're exactly right.
Christmas.
You're right, exactly right. So you got it this month. Next month, report to us what you think we need to do better and any mistakes that are being made. I can tell you right now, I've got to get out and update like next steps in the trails thing that needs to be updated, and I haven't had a chance to do that.
I had at least one person poke their head in when I happened to be in the office and we were actually open. And had questions about it, and I pointed him to this. He had no idea that was out there, but he was appreciative that had been placed on the website, so.
Oh, the whole trails thing? Okay, great.
Yeah, we didn't understand what the controversy was. I'm like, well, right there.
Okay, okay. And there's some minor updates that I have to do. So we're on to trail system, and Rick, did you want to give a report?
Sure. We had our first open meeting this week with the public there. It was different for us. We're kind of getting used to that format. What we did is we reviewed A to Z, all the options we were presented by our outside firm, Gordy Frazier. We went through those, and then we're just digesting those and looking forward to how we get additional community input. We had a couple follow-ups with individuals that were at the meeting, like the community fund or foundation, I'm sorry. And we're just taking a minute here to absorb it all in. And it's kind of complicated because there's so many different pieces to it. So we're putting that together.
Okay, any questions on that from anybody?
Hey, Rick, it's John Wemlinger. Who was
morning.
there from the Community Foundation?
Laura,
Gosh, I didn't look around the room. There are a lot of people there. I'm glad she was there. I'm glad she heard all of that going on.
yeah, and then I had a follow-up conversation with her at length yesterday.
Good, great, thanks.
Sure, no problem. And
Anything else?
I also want to thank Vic for helping the team out, getting that all together and supporting us because it was a new phase. So thank you, Vic.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. It's always painful to go out and look at yourself on video. I could do about 10, by the way, I published it in the meetings section on our website. The meetings are not yet there, but the link to the, I think it's like Manistee TV or something like that. And,
Where did you put it?
it go to minutes, which are on the very right side, all the way down on the right.
Under the Parks and Rec.
Yes. I think that's the only thing I can touch is Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And if you go to minutes, even further down. No, that's another section.
Minutes.
Keep going down. There you go, trails feasibility. And there's a link where you can go out and actually view the whole thing. I watched 10 minutes of myself. It was too painful. I
2 hours. Wow.
Oh, it went. It
Hey,
went.
come on. You should have been there. Thank you for those of you who attended. It was one thing to attend. It was one thing to do a meeting like that. I've never done anything like that before. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and kudos to Barry Lynn from Manistee TV too, to get that out as quickly as he did. That's nice to be able to have out there, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's better than minutes, frankly. It's what happened.
It expands my understanding of volunteering for Parks and Rec and the great township we live in.
Oh, and me too. Okay,
Take that with a grain of salt. That's a joke.
Can I just ask, did anybody hear from Rod Hudson that he was not gonna be able to be at the meeting?
Yes,
He
yeah.
did.
Yes.
He was-
And I know Andrea was out of town on business, so I just wanted to make sure that those members of the team from the village had let you know they couldn't be there.
Were any of the individuals running for village council attending, like the right?
Wayne Miller was there.
Okay,
The, and I am anticipating is a write-in candidate for president.
yeah, and was Nola or Mickey Finan?
Nola Tay was there and Mickey Finan was there.
Okay, that's great.
John, who else is running for president?
Nola Tay,
Okay,
and she's a write-in candidate as well.
okay.
Roger Berger is a write-in candidate for trustee. Tom Foster is a on the ballot candidate for trustee. And Susan Halloran is on the ballot running for another term. And that's it, I think.
And just to answer your question, John, on that, all the documentation is shared by every team member, whether they're there or not.
Good.
And also Rod had a separate call with Gordy Frazier to answer any questions he had or anything.
Oh, good, great.
Yeah, so we
Good.
got a pretty cohesive group going.
So Rick, Paul Muller, I was at the meeting and I'll say near the conclusion of the meeting, the discussion was getting the information out to the public was sort of at least the way I walked away with your number one task. Any further thoughts when that may be?
No, I don't want to, we got to work through it. We'll get it out on a timely basis. I don't have any direct date on when that is. We need to go through it and figure out what pieces we're putting together. From a timing standpoint, we've got quite a bit of time to work on it. Our goal is to work to the point where we can activate the Michigan Endowment Grant that we have. Our tentative plan is to work that through next year, which is 2025, and then go to next funding based on where we go 2026.
So just so that everybody understands what is likely to happen is we are very likely to get a FOIA request very, very soon to publish that information. And since it is in my hands, it might have to go out as it is, which you really don't want to do. But we just need to be aware that a FOIA request is potential to happen. And what our hope was to put this on the web along with a survey, but to put it out there in a fashion that makes it as simple as it can possibly be, because you have 7 segments. In the segments, you have multiple alternatives within them. Within each alternative, you have pinch points in front of this facility and that facility. So it's very complicated. And so we're thinking of the methodology of doing it in a way that makes it as simple as we possibly can. I just warn everyone that there's a possibility of a FOIA request and that might force the issue. And then, Rick talked about how we have time. There's 2 things that have happened. Number one, they're no longer trying to meet a February 25th deadline for the TAP grant. I think he sort of implied that in that conversation, which really relieves pressure because we would have almost had to ask the board for funding on the next 2 meetings or so to meet that deadline. And I think their team has decided that's just not reasonable. And then the other thing is we were working to hit the next township board meeting to present to them what our thoughts were. And the township board meeting has now been moved back to the 20th because that's when the new people will be elected. So that gave us a little time to do this. It's on the table that if I get a FOIA request and that document, I think has to go out, or I'll defer to the township board members on what we need to do to actually meet that FOIA request.
And we've been pretty good. I think Vic would agree on any request. We've got all the data. We post it up in a timely manner if somebody does that. So that's not an issue for us.
Hey,
Well,
Rick,
and I have it, so I mean, it doesn't make, I have the documentation, so if it comes in, I'll put it out there. Go ahead, John.
hey, Rick, has Andrea, have you mentioned to Andrea or has she offered whether or not she intends to continue on the team after she is no longer a village council trustee?
She is, planning not to do that when she, relinquishes her role in the trustee.
Okay, so one of the things that Andrea and I will do to collaborate is to have conversations with whoever is elected as the village president to expeditiously identify the new council members that will replace Andrea on the Trails team and replace me as the village council representative to the Parks and Rec Committee.
That'd be great, John. Maybe you and I can have a conversation sometime after the meeting or later today.
Yeah, I have a person in mind for my replacement.
Okay, so let's, just give me a call, your convenience. I'm pretty much available all day.
Okay, bud.
Thank you.
This is Paul again. Let me just throw out from that meeting and all the variations that we saw at that meeting. I have a whole bunch of concerns about the plan, but one that helped clarify, and I'll just pick out, from, Lake Street, not Lake Street, yeah, Lake Street towards Portage Point Drive. And the discussion of we may need easements to construct the trail. I wonder how many years in court you will be trying to get those easements. Because those landowners are pinched against the road right now.
Where are you talking?
Yeah, you
about?
know,
Oh, yeah.
all I can say, Paul, is it was just shown to us. We haven't analyzed it or gone through it. So it was almost like, here's everything and it's a working meeting. So nothing's been defined.
No,
Okay.
I got it, but that's what the public saw, those 30 people in the room. And I think that's one of the, several of them, walked away with that. And I know you've seen the signs, and that's part of why you've seen the signs.
Do we know what the width of the road right of way is for a state highway through that section? I mean, here's the point, we're never.
Yeah,
gonna
we
get-
have all the data. We've got
Yeah.
all the data through Gordy Fraser. We understand where a roadway is not. When we originally started the project, one of our founding principles was avoiding any contentious property interactions, to what Paul said, and not go down a litigation role. We're trying to be as friendly as possible. So we basically saw everything. Nobody should go to a conclusion is that's that. It's our job to kind of put it together and present it in the most comprehensive and friendly manner and get consensus and approval.
And Rick, is it fair to say that we're going to the greatest extent possible, or maybe mandatory, work within the existing road right away if it's wide enough? Is that the idea?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that rumor mill came up 3 meetings ago. You're gonna condemn our property. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do that. Blah blah blah. We gotta nip that and shut that conversation out, because that isn't what's going to happen. But on the other hand, a lot of the houses along that stretch are way encroaching into the road right of way that they don't recognize that. So there's a needle we have to thread here.
Yeah, and you know, we need a lot more development work and whatever to find out where it is. I mean, the challenge is we're laying it out and you don't know exactly at one point in a mileage or in a road where we need to go wider or lower. So it's one of the challenges is when you have these open meetings and showing everything, we're still working through a lot of those things. Nothing's been defined. And it's tough when people go to conclusions saying this is what's going to happen. You just kind of walk through the process. But like I said, like you mentioned, Ed, our goal is not to go run into those type of issues, or we don't want to have a conflict, so to speak.
Right.
Good
Okay,
question. So thank you.
all right, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay on time, so, anything else on the trail? All right, next is, things that happened at the board meeting, just reporting back to you guys, going forward, with a storage building behind the township office, I believe is gonna happen. And right now, we're gonna have to temporarily, store the walkway, which reminds me, I asked Anthony's for a bid to pick all that up, and I have not heard back from them, so I'll need to follow up on that. We're gonna be adding a sign at Seymour. And I think Michelle's gone forward to actually make that happen. Board agreed that we should do that. We also talked about the maintenance employee to coincide with, the Langland bathroom closure on 11/15 with reduced hours. I mentioned to them there's a tree down at the, Clark, road end, and Anthony's is gonna remove that. This was not a board discussion item, the donation policy, but I was told in the meeting that, if you want a park bench in Manistee, you just go to Public Works and there's a process, so, I think I or someone needs to get with Public Works and,
I can get that for you.
okay, that would be great. Because that, I mean, as opposed to eating this whale of a donation policy, which we talk about, but it always ends up on the, open items list. If there's something easy we can do to get a person to, put a bench in, as long as we have some consistency going forward, then, let's learn what they do and then we'll bring it back to this group to talk about.
I might interject there, though, that takes care of one type of donation, but I'm
Right.
kind of hanging out in the wind with sponsorships
Yeah.
and other
Oh,
private.
I agree.
Still.
I agree. I'm just telling you what was discussed at that meeting
Yeah,
and,
that's good. That's good news.
but we have, I think we have donation policy as item 5 on open items, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
The village just adopted a donation policy or.
Oh.
Well, let me.
You got us excited.
It's not the donation policy that you're hanging out in the wind on. It's the donation policy about somebody wants to put a memorial bench. How do they do that? And let me see if I can get Ruth to send you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So then we
It's
can,
pretty short and sweet,
Okay.
but,
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be something for us to think about. At least, we're gonna get there.
and again, I think it's important to be consistent. So if there's something in our donation policy that you guys think is missing, then communicate that back to the village because they want to have a standard like we do for the village wants to have a standard for the village like you are looking at for the township, and there's no reason that those two should not be somewhat fairly consistent.
We can make that an agenda item for next month. Okay, invasive species within parks should be handled by parks. We have had this discussion over and over again, but the board made the decision that we need to handle it in parks. And further, that we need to get estimates for each park, get those costs of, number one, get the costs for the estimates and bring them to the board. And then when we get the estimates, bring those to the board as well. So how would we do that? Any ideas? I know, Michelle, you've been involved. I'm sure Tyler, you have some
and I
ideas.
wanna do a mea culpa, because I think I was confusing to you, Tyler, because I talked to Cindy about this whole RFP for this, water invasives. And I think at the time I was thinking we could maybe include something in that RFP, but the board was pretty clear they wanted to separate that, so that vendors, if we did an alternate in that RFP but it needs to be separate from what invasive species is doing, I think.
Like
Just
you're
to
talking
keep that.
about what's the
PLM.
company?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
the way, so just to back up, the way, because I'm working on the RFP for the invasives committee right now, and the way that we are going to structure the RFP is line itemed bid opportunities. So essentially, we've got a lake manager, so the person doing the testing, making recommendations, a lake chemical treatment line item, a mechanical or diver assisted suction harvesting line item. And then it was whether or not there should be another line item for wetlands or park terrestrial treatments in there. And realistically, I think with this new contract, PLM in the past, and what I've gotten from PLM, they haven't really adjusted their fee structure. And they believe that when this RFP goes out, we're not gonna have money to even think about terrestrial treatments. So,
So let's just be clear. I think there's discussion about whether riparian wetlands can be legally covered by the special assessment. I think the conclusion was yes, based on the way the special assessment language is written. We're talking about generally our upland parks. And so the question became, we know that's gonna get paid for out of a different pot of funds, but because you're issuing this request for proposals, should we have a very clear section in there that says we wanna have invasive species treatment in our parks? This is a separate bid item, and then this committee can make a recommendation as to whether or not we wanna use some of those. What I suggested too is, but you're the expert, I mean, there's that Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network that I don't think we've ever contacted to do stuff. I know they do stuff in the city of Manistee. There may be things that we can get done as a Parks Committee, separate from that RFP, recommend that to the board, but if he's going out, if the invasive species is going out, it's gonna cast a pretty broad net. We have a specific item for treatment on upland areas and parks, maybe we can get a better price. So I don't know if that's something that you guys want to add in there or not, or if that's been decided.
so it would be an additional line item in the invasives RFP, but you're saying not to be covered by the special
Absolutely
assessment.
not, correct.
Okay. Yeah, that could be something, I don't know if it really would. I don't know if it should be included in that RFP or if there should just be a separate township RFP for terrestrial treatments that goes out.
To
I
me,
could
it
still-
would simplify, because isn't this being targeted on lake manager types is who we're gonna be sending that to, and there's probably lots of places that do upland stuff that don't do lakes, right? Or are they all kind of the
Right.
same pot?
Yeah, so it would be a large, different list.
Okay.
Of who I would be targeting to send that RFP. If I am going to include terrestrial treatments, it would just be a lot more people that I'd have to add.
Yeah.
when
So
I send
I
that.
feel like I don't wanna make your life more difficult, so I think we should pursue the upland stuff kind of separately.
Separately.
But I do think that from the invasive species committee perspective, the things that can be paid for by the special assessment, which includes the riparian wetlands, I think you need to include that in your,
Specifically the wetland.
the wetlands,
So
right?
wetlands part,
But the rest of the parks, I think, are pretty much gonna be general fund, probably different vendor. And it could be that that vendor does the stuff. I mean, if there's whoever the lake manager is, if they find invasive species in the wetlands that can be paid for by the special assessment, I think you have to figure out how that's gonna get treated at that time. But I think that should be part of that should be the dividing line, because that's kind of how the language was written, I think. We've looked at that before, right?
yeah, and the one thing I'm not sure on is. Cause with the overarching law, the umbrella law that allows the establishment of these special assessment districts, it says for watershed improvements. So watershed improvements could be a large swath of areas. Technically, that is farms, different things that all contribute inputs into the lake. So that's where, depending on how the special assessment district language is set up, you can go after a much larger area. It depends on the local municipality and how they set their language for the special assessment.
Like Cardin, with Cardin.
Hardin technically, there's a large area.
Yeah, no, I know, it could be, based on that definition, it could be huge, but
But if
specifically
you
Cardin.
wanted, yeah, if you wanted your special assessment district language to be just riparian areas, so anywhere that you have a creek that is flowing and, you'd have to be very specific on what well, I guess you don't have to be, but there is a definition of a riparian area, but you could make an argument that portions of Cardin are riparian, portions are not.
Oh, I see.
But
So-
I don't think the board wants to get into a position where somebody's questioning the way those dollars are spent. I think the general public considers that to be the lake and adjacent areas that are like.
Right.
And that's what I'm not still certain on, is how that special assessment district language is.
I can give you the language, and I think it's fairly broad, but we've not implemented it in a broad way.
Okay.
But this gray area, particularly of the wetlands park or the wetlands down here, I think we have done or been close to doing. And I think we should include that in your RFP. But anything else, I think we just need to pay for out of the general fund and find a different vendor to do that potentially, so.
I just want to point out that when Mary Reed and I were working on invasives way in the beginning, she did have PLM do some invasive treatment on what is now Cedar Grove Wetlands Preserve. Because, so there's another category. We have the parks, we have the lake, but we also have township owned property. And that kind of doesn't fall into either. And so when you are on the west side of North Point, there's a big wetlands there, you know where Cedar Grove is.
Yep,
So,
and you have invasive Phragmites on,
well, I thought it was, and there's some controversy as to whether it's a hybrid or native or invasive, but my point being that let's not forget that there's also stuff that is lands that are
Yeah.
contiguous with the lake, if you will, that fall into another category.
Yeah, so I would say that those wetlands probably, in my opinion, even though they're probably all hydrologically connected, really, there's a road between them. I'm not sure if that.
Oh, there's a culvert and an opening too. I mean,
Okay.
it is
Yeah.
contiguous.
I just think we have to be careful. I mean, that's
I
probably.
agree, but I don't
game day
wanna
call.
lose the fact that
Yeah.
that's gonna spread.
But if we cover what we call upland or riparian areas, wetlands, whatever, in that thing, so we have that there, and then we go out and we look at stuff when we come on a specific situation, we can decide which one's gonna pay for it at that point, I think. To make that call. So I think we're covered. We just need, and I don't think that the township board wants to ignore all their property that they own that aren't parks. If there's invasive species in there, we probably ought to try to take care of them, within reason. So I think we're covered as long as we can get those kind of gray areas within that RFP.
I just
yeah,
wanna
I
bring
think
it
it
up to
just
them that,
probably should be an open, like, communication between the invasives committee and parks. If the parks has an area that they want to treat and it kind of, say it's Cedar Grove wetlands, I think would fall within the jurisdiction of the special assessment district. It's a contiguous wetland. But I realistically think that with this new RFP and some of the services that are gonna reduce chemical inputs into the lake that we are targeting for this upcoming year, I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of funding, so that would put like something like Cedar Grove wetlands as like a lower priority for the invasives committee. So not to say that the parks shouldn't be able to go and do that, it's just thinking through how much of that the parks wants to do and if it becomes a budget line item.
But it does fall within the scope of a wetlands,
The
right?
technical language of the special assessment district, yes, it would.
So,
I just wanna clarify, Cedar Grove is owned by the watershed, and I believe they are going to maintain that. It's that property that's between Cedar
Okay.
Grove and the lake that is a deeded park from the original plat.
And same situation, so.
I didn't want the public to think that we were
Right,
treating.
well, okay, so I just need to be clear. So in what the assignment to us was to find out what it would cost to get an estimate to deal with the terrestrial invasive species at our parks. That is a single line item and will include all of our parks with the exception of the wetlands, which is clearly covered under
Mhm.
your initiative. And then outside of that, you have these other wetlands that we're talking about.
Except for Eagle View would be the.
Eagle View would also be,
Eagle
yeah,
View.
Eagle View would also,
Technically, Eagle View, there's not really much for riparian. There's frog bit in there, which is a true aquatic, and they're getting into those cattails and hand pulling frog bit out of there.
that also includes fell deck, doesn't it? I mean, they're,
Right.
they're.
Yeah.
So the fell deck, the Eagle View and the wetlands parks are dealt with in that project. And so we would be getting estimates for the remaining parks. Is that?
I think that sounds fair.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
What do we do?
Tyler.
We've been doing this for close to 20 years now.
I would defer to you guys on that. I don't know.
What was your
Well,
question?
PLM, we're approaching 20 years of a special assessment district. What have they been doing historically around, these parks or these wetland areas? Are they even aware that it's a park or not, or it's just the wetlands and they treat it as required?
With PLM as the lake manager and the chemical treatment company, PLM heavily focuses on the aquatic system. They do terrestrial treatments as well. They have certifications to treat there, but it's not really their expertise.
Great with that.
But I
So,
was mentioning more like, Eagle View. I mean, they don't differentiate between a landowner's piece of property and Eagle View in their treatment, right?
well, if it's in the water, if they're doing, if there's cattails or something
Right.
that someone wants to have treated, then that landowner has to reach out to PLM separately. It's a separate thing. The landowner can have their
Right.
view shed opened up or treated, but
Yeah, they don't differentiate between public and private shoreline, if you will, in their treatment.
no,
Yeah.
because they're treating in the water.
Right.
Okay,
Okay,
one more thing just on that too, with the Northwest Invasive Species Network, they will do work, but they focus on priority species. Which would not be automotive, would not be those things, Phragmites, knotweed. Barberry, maybe, they have, if you go to their website, they have their top 12 priority species, and that's what they will do treatments for at a cost share. They are extremely stretched for field staff, and they still can sometimes offer that cost share, and then they will contract out the work to a private company.
So we were on their agenda for a garlic mustard pull when the woolly adelgid, I'm saying that
Yeah,
correctly,
it's the big
became
thing.
their top priority, and so we got dropped, I will say. So we have been in contact with them. When I was in contact with James Scarlotta and working on this in the past, they were part of the group that we reached out to, because I actually got my list that I was contacting from the Conservation District. So I went down their list of vendors, plus also reached out to Northwest. And Mary Reed and Al Taylor, I think, both worked with species as well.
so can you help us with this? I mean, I have no idea how to get estimates for these things. I know it's not
I
your
think
next-
we'll probably, I really think if you want to go after invasive species, you probably should have an RFP system and stretch it a little wider than just Jim Scarlotta and talk about like an annual contract, because Jim does jobs, but then he
Well, I
goes.
called everybody
people-
on your list.
Yeah,
So it
well,
wasn't just you.
there's an MDARD list as well, so you
Okay.
can go through, MDARD has a list of registered pesticide applicators. And you just have to sort by their category type, so where they can actually, where they're licensed to treat. And you may be able to take a broader, sweep of contractors out there if we had like an annual contract where
For sure.
there was a line item and, we're gonna treat this much in this year.
Yeah,
And this is a contract for this company to do the treatment.
all right, but
I'm happy to assist since I worked on this in the past.
so we have a lot left on the agenda, but I want to be sensitive to Charmy's time. And also Ed has a hard stop and he's going to be needing to share with her presentation. So is it okay if we sort of stop where we are right now?
I think too, that Far Friends is in here at 10 o'clock too.
Okay, so we definitely need to get,
Yeah.
Charmy, can you join us?
Yes. So I have a presentation. What is the easiest way to?
Would I just,
Can you, how big is it?
I don't know.
If you want to email it to me, I can put it up on this computer and then just click the mouse for it, or if you have it on a thumb drive.
Have it on?
Perfect.
oh, great.
I think I'll have to give you, we'll have to unlock it. But,
Pick any chair you want to sit in.
does anyone have a preference?
No, no.
You did it.
Yeah, it's encrypted. The state doesn't trust us. so.
Just so you guys know, Michelle and I went to a meeting of M Parks and is it M Parks, the name of the organization?
How big it is, but I can give you
Lansing,
the code
And
you just
last
pop it in.
June, and this is when we met Jeremy, and she is responsible, I think her title is I'm gonna have her introduce herself, but I thought, you know what? Let's learn from the DNR what their programs are. That would be of value to us, so.
Thank you. We clearly can't be trusted to carry PowerPoints around. Everything.
So the grants presentation, is that the one?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, whatever works.
So, thank you for the invitation. My name is Jeremy Cleary. I'm a grant coordinator for Department of Natural Resources in the Recreation Grant section. So we do a lot of grants, the department. I do recreation grants, so parks, trails, some acquisition of green space, those types of things. We have 3 funding sources that I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to try to be really quick because I'm imagining you have some ideas you want to kind of bounce around and talk about as well. So I'll try to zoom through. There's a lot about each of the different funding sources, and it's all on our website. We have a booklet for every one of them with all of the nitty-gritty details, and if you're really interested in one, we can talk about that later. But I just wanted to quickly go over all 3 of them.
I'm gonna see if I can share this real quick, just so we have that.
And I'd love to say I had a beautiful drive up, but it was rainy and dark.
Yeah.
God, it's probably beautiful out there, but I can't see it.
You came in from where?
I came down from the Traverse area this morning. Okay, recreation passport. That fund is funded by when you buy your passport for your license. We are only allowed to spend 2 million every year. Period. So that's what's appropriated for us. Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund is obviously one of our flagship programs at the department. I did note the township has had 2 trust fund grants in the past, so you're a little bit familiar with that one, funded by revenues from oil and gas on state land. And then our federal partners at the National Park Service grant Michigan a certain allotment, an appropriation every year. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is actually not really a pass-through. The Park Service grants it to the state, and the state in turn disperses that to the locals. And we keep some for the department, to be quite honest. I have on there some approximate values. Recreation passport is always 2 million. The trust fund amount depends on what the trust fund board wants to spend. And so that can vary. A nice average is about $20-ish million. And then the Park Service, our appropriation can be anywhere from 5 to 10 million. So gave you the low end here. What do you have to do to apply? You have to be a local unit of government, which you are. And then you can see some regional recreation authorities are eligible. Tribes are only eligible for our federal fund. But what you have to have is an approved recreation plan. And for the rec passport, we will just accept a capital improvement plan, but the township's plan is approved until the end of 26. Yes.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm not trying to hijack anything, but just real quick. So we did this multi-unit
Oh, yeah, because you're
rec
part of the
plan for
county.
the Northwest Michigan
Yes,
Council of
yes.
Governments, and I also work for the city of NSD. They were told that because it was a multi-unit thing, we had to continue to do that every year.
Oh,
We
gosh,
couldn't
no.
break off and do our own. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm just gonna grab my copy. No, you
Okay.
would not have to.
Okay, I don't know where that information came from then, but that's good to know. In case we ever, not that we would, but if we ever decided to do our own parks and rec plan, we have the ability to do that.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
I got a
Absolutely.
question. I don't know if they're appropriate to ask right now, so I apologize.
Sure.
If I'm breaking in. But would a master plan also equate to a government plan? We have parks and recs, but if we have a master plan that's for the township, would that equate to an equivalent document?
if it included all of our requirements. So we have some specific requirements about parks inventories and accessibility ratings, goals and objectives specific to parks and recreation. If those things were included in the master plan, then I think we could count it.
Okay,
But we do have it approved.
But yes, the township is approved through 26.
thank you.
So in 2026, you might want to start thinking about how you want to move forward. Of course, you only need this if you want to apply for grants. So it's not a requirement. It's a lot different than the master plan you're referring to, which is the basis for your planning and zoning. Really, the recreation plan is a tool to get in the door for grants.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
I don't
Yeah.
know why it's flashing.
That's all right.
Does not want to let me. There we go.
I was gonna say, I can just grab mine and.
No, we're good, we're good. I just.
I mentioned we do acquisition, the trust fund and the land and water conservation fund do fund acquisition projects. Otherwise, developments, public, outdoor recreation. So it has to be public, open to the public at all times, has to be outdoors. Obviously recreation. The exception is the recreation passport does fund some indoor buildings, indoor recreation type facilities, so. But trust fund of the land and water is outdoors. So we don't do nature centers or classrooms or things like that with the trust fund. Just some examples, and you all know this, you can go on, but it's trails, it's playgrounds, it's splash pads, it's campgrounds, parking, trailheads, restrooms, those types of, things you would find in a park. Canoe launches, anything like that.
That's the one we just closed, isn't
I think we're all in the good graces of the DNR now, right? We have all our grants closed out, and thank you for your help with it.
So what's important here is these are the maximum amount you can ask for. But the trust fund was increased this past year from 300,000 to 400,000, because we all know 300,000 doesn't go very far these days. So they did increase the maximum ask. Match is important, and I want to talk about match a little bit here. All of our grants require some level of match. The rec passport is 25%. You do not get rewarded if you put in more match. So if you put in 30 or 35 or 50, we don't care.
it? It's scored.
It's not scored. Land and water conservation fund is 50, period. No more, no less. You have to come to the table with 50%.
Well,
And the trust fund now is 25% to get in the door, but you are scored for more match, you get more points. So that is the one category where we do reward communities for bringing more money to the table with their projects.
and does that include if they get grants from other entities, would that be included? Okay.
So there is some caveats, not all grants count as match,
Okay.
especially when you get into the federal money. But for the most part, many of them for the trust fund are eligible match sources. And I think that's the next slide is what is match. So of course, your general fund, donations, other grants that you receive, whether they're local, states, some federal. I don't want to say all federal because they have a lot of strings attached to them, but there are some federal grants that will count. Volunteers, volunteer labor, force account labor, your own employee labor, and materials is also eligible match. It's just a lot more paperwork, but it does count.
So you said your federal grant is not a pass through, so does it adhere to CFR 200 or? Cause I'm thinking,
Some parts of it do,
okay,
not all of them, and it's very interesting, but we have with the ARPA dollars appropriated to the state, we did a program called Spark. And it's federal dollars, same regulations, but like that requires Davis-Bacon, where our Land and Water Conservation Fund does not. Buy America, Build America applies to land and water, but not to Spark. And so I'm not an expert to tell you all the differences, but yes, some of them.
On the last slide, what was the forced labor?
That would be your own, if you had a DPW
Forced
department,
account labor?
Like your workforce.
it's called forced account.
It's very confusing terminology.
I think it's a terrible word. It sounds like prison
Shame
labor.
gangs.
It does, it sounds like
Shame
prison labor.
gangs.
I agree. I did not come up with the terminology.
So we're fortunate here. We have a community foundation that has a fund.
Nice.
It's called the Minger Fund. And its purpose is for it's for recreational purposes, trails.
Okay.
And they have been very generous with our little community here, the township and the village. When the grant application goes into you, does the money need to look like it's coming from the governmental entity's general fund?
I don't care where it comes from, but I need it documented. So
Okay.
I would need something from the foundation with your application that says,
Gotcha.
yeah, we're a partner, we're gonna pony up this amount.
Gotcha. Okay.
For you folks, I'm looking for the resolution from the board that says we'll commit so much from general fund. Donors, a letter again that says we're willing to donate. Either funds or labor or, materials.
Okay.
But we need that commitment in writing with the application.
For all the funding groups.
Yes.
That would be included.
Yeah, so if you're asking for $400,000, I think the match minimum is like 130 for 25%. So I'm gonna look for at least $130,000 in commitments in writing. The other thing you have to have is site control. So, most often that's fee simple ownership, but permanent easements count. For trails, excuse me, quite often, they're in the road right of way, and so we look for approval or permission from the granting road agency that's in charge of that, so.
And how would that work with our
So,
platted roads?
yeah, so the question would be whether or not the township has control of them or the road commission, but whoever is finally identified to have control over them, they would need to make sure.
But that would be an activity we would need to do, is to determine who has, okay.
Because we have a weird plat out here around Portage Lake that was done in the turn of the century in Chicago, and they didn't realize there were sand dunes and hills and valleys and stuff. So there's a ton of unimproved paper roads out there where it's right for trail systems. And we've talked about at some point,
Okay.
maybe trying to create some trail systems, but we have
Okay.
to clear all that up to figure out who controls those
Yeah.
ways.
So things you have to get, even to apply is a rec plan, match, and site control. I mean, those are the have-tos.
Okay.
Then you're in the door, and then we can start talking about, how do we do a really good application? How do things score well? So our applications, we allow you to apply to all three funds. You can put in 3 recreation passport applications per year, unlimited trust fund and land and water fund. If you've got match, you wanna apply, absolutely. And I have folks that will apply in both rec passport and trust fund and just see which scores better.
For the same project,
Mhm.
and you don't object to that?
We don't object to that. Our caveat is we'll figure out where you fit.
Okay,
If you score really good in both, we're not gonna fund you for both.
right.
So that's a conversation about where do you fit, where do you wanna be?
So one of the, go ahead, Rick.
Could you share at a high level, you keep on using the word score or whatever, could you give us a highlight of maybe the key items that are critical or favorable when we're applying for this place?
Hang on, It's coming.
Okay,
It's coming.
Now
I
let's-
promise.
all right.
You can go on. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on some of these details. What are you committing to if you get a grant with the trust fund in land and water? It's a permanent encumbrance for public outdoor recreation. So we require that. Rec passport's just 20 years unless it's a facility like a restroom. Then it's a 40-year commitment, the lifespan of that scope item, but for the trust fund in particular in land and water, it's permanent.
I have a question.
Yes.
Again, so we have a commitment on our trust fund projects that we have to maintain them, keep them open, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
That's again, we have Eagle that says, can't touch the sand dune, can't touch it, can't do anything with the sand dune, but the sand dune is wrecking the facility. Eagle and the DNR need to get together and figure out for public agencies how we can be flexible in the sand dune rules to maintain this stuff, especially for coastal communities. We've been butting our head for years on this, and we have real problems out at Landing Park because we're not able to move any sand that's swallowing our facilities. So if
Okay.
I would love, and I'm sure our township supervisor would love to have a further conversation with you on that, because it's a real issue, and I know Vic has been involved. as
And
well.
we need our coastal people in
Yeah,
that conversation,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the process of trying to do a maintenance permit, but they've had changeover in the personnel. And the person who has now got responsible for our area was the person who was absolutely by the book. Where the
We love
two,
those people.
the two supervisory people were very accommodative, recognizing the situation that we're in.
Right,
We cannot comply because you
Right.
won't let us.
right.
So somehow or another, that would be something we need to
We
do.
need
And the
to,
solution
Rational,
for a
yeah.
public agency, for a public purpose, we're not developing condos, can't be, you have to hand it the same. That doesn't work. We have to be able to have the appropriate machinery and the appropriate setbacks for the slope to be able to just maintain this, and then we'll maintain it. But if we can't even get in there, it's a real problem.
Vic, will you email me, just like, I'll forget the name of the park. So will
Sure.
you email me just a brief summary so that I can
That would be
Remember.
most excellent. 'Cause we've been down this path a few times over the past 20 years. And we've gotten different levels of advancement, and then we always just hit a brick wall and it can't happen. So it'd be nice if we could get, because we're not the only community that deals with it. And I'll give you an example. Manistee, because they're not critical dune, even though there was huge sand dunes that they mined years ago before that law went into effect, they go with big heavy equipment and level the beaches every year because they're allowed to do it. And we're just up the path a little bit. We have, the same active dunes that they had, but because it was a post-critical dune determination, can't do it. It just seems very arbitrary. to me.
Which frustrating tends to be there's houses on the south side, houses on the north side that were constructed, but our park is the critical dune.
Anyway.
This really isn't the reason we brought you here. But
Just to be clear, the encumbrance is perpetual, but that doesn't mean like you always have to have swing sets there. Like if we paid for swing
Okay.
sets and I come back 20 years from now and the swing sets are gone, I'm not coming back 20 years from now, but
Okay.
I mean, those things happen, but the requirement is public outdoor recreation. So if you replace the swing sets or you just tear them down because they're unsafe,
Okay.
it's still open for the public. It's still available for outdoor
So
recreation.
the one thing is that it was in the actual grant that it was accessible, ADA accessible. And so that's where we're getting really tricky.
Okay,
It's-
everything we do,
Can we
has to
drop
be
off the
ADA.
ADA accessible?
everything we do has to be.
But does it have to be, so it was originally when it was built, now we're having trouble maintaining that because of the sand issue, and at some point we aren't gonna be able to maintain it. So does that?
So if you take it out is one option, but if it's replaced,
Okay,
it still needs to meet
Okay.
ADA. I mean, as a government entity,
Yeah,
everything you
right.
do needs to be ADA.
In the well-maintained category, are you permitted, and you may answer this in a later slide, just tell me that if you are you permitted to put maintenance costs into the grant application?
We do not pay for
Thank you,
maintenance.
okay.
So our timeline is, the grants open, we have an online grant system. It will open in January sometime. It may be a little bit later this year. If you don't have a recreation plan and you want to apply, we need those by February first, so we have time to review them and get them approved, but applications are due April first every year. All 3 programs, same system, April first. We spend the spring doing administrative review. We visit all the sites in the summer. We do scoring. We call it preliminary scoring in August-ish. We release the scores to the applicant. For those of you who haven't been through the process, then you have 2 weeks to respond to questions or provide more information or somehow try to improve your score. We come back, we rescore everything. If you want to advance, you can go ahead and advance one more, I think. And then they take different paths. Recreation passport is really just a decision by the director. He looks literally at the scores and we go down from top to bottom until we're out of $2 million. And then those are the folks who are offered a project agreement. Land and Water Conservation Fund, then we have to package all of this up and go to the Park Service. So that takes a little longer. It's gonna take anywhere from 6 to 8 months probably to get a funding decision and be able to offer an agreement. And then the trust fund is the decision of the trust fund board. They meet every December to make those decisions. It's like Christmas, and just bring popcorn and watch them. They don't necessarily have to go by the scores. They have their own pet projects. They're board appointed by the governor and they get to do what they want. So they select how much. First, the meeting starts with how much are we gonna spend this year, and Treasury comes and gives them a big presentation on the funds. And then they go through and they are looking at acquisition and development and splitting the money between the two. But once they have their recommendations, that isn't the end of the story. It goes to the legislature to appropriate the money. And this year that did not happen until October. So even though we knew in December who was gonna be funded, we couldn't offer anything until just earlier this month. It was very frustrating. Not happy with our legislature, but go ahead. I think this is the scoring part you might have been interested in. What I'd like to show you here is our recreation passport program is really the simplest application and has the least scoring criteria. You are scored on, your design, the site quality, the application in general. Did it answer all the questions? Did it leave us confused? We do look at your grant history. So that per capita grant assistance at the bottom is if you've been really successful in the last few years, you get the least amount of points in that category. But if you haven't had a grant in over 10 years, you get the most amount of points. So we're trying to spread the wealth, I guess.
So if we've gotten a trust fund grant, but we've never applied for recreation, is that within each
It is
category?
within each category.
Okay. The one thing, the urban area hurts us up here a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
on the trust fund, but fortunately these two don't have it. Right?
Yeah, nope, land and water, I thought land and water. Nope, it's not. The median household income is couched under financial needs. We used to use the median household income as our standard, and we're switching this year. So we'll see how it goes. 25 will be the first year. We're going to move to something called the Alice data set. It's from United Way. It takes into account more than just income.
Good.
And so
But is that countywide data, the Alice?
it is census tract. It's
Okay.
down to the census tract.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps the township or not. It
No.
probably helps like the city of Manistee and some of those areas. But
It's gonna be interesting. I have some really rural areas that maybe did really well in median household income, but because they're so sparse, their census tract is huge.
Mm.
And it might encompass a wealthy community and now they're being harmed. So it's gonna be interesting.
So as the entrance fees, is that you like to see entrance fees or you do not?
No entrance fees gets the most points. We do allow entrance fees, but there are some sidebars on that. The biggest one really is you can't charge non-residents more than double the fee of residents. But as long as you have a policy where people can walk or bike in for free, then you still get the full points, or a waiver. you know, for folks who can't pay the entrance fees or parking fees, a waiver would suffice too. But yes, we like to see it open to the public.
Can I ask a question on previous grants, please?
Sure.
So those are previous grants from any source, not just from you, right?
No, just from us.
Oh, so if we've got a grant from another fund, like John mentioned, the Manistee County Foundation, that's not a negative. It's got to be from, you're just looking, money's from you in the past.
Yeah, the
okay.
trust fund would like to spread the wealth around and not keep going back to the same communities who maybe score high because they have a lot of urban points.
Or they have a staff of.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, that's really the intent there. On that last slide, if you notice, the trust fund had the most scoring criteria.
Well,
It does have the most requirements for an application, and the board has their priorities. You see, natural resources are only scored in the trust fund. And one of the board priorities is trails. And so typically, if you want to do a trail, I'm going to steer you to the trust fund because it's rewarded there. RP, the rec passport is, I do a ton of playgrounds, swing sets, things like that in that fund. Just because, you know, they're not looking for natural resource points. They just want an accessible playground. So they all of them seem to have their little niche of where certain types of projects score better.
and in that financial need, if the village is included,
Might help.
it would help.
Yeah.
I can whip through these really quick. The application, you have a narrative, they have a certain number of required documents. You can keep going. The match needs to be documented. We've already talked about that. This is just a capture of our online system. It's really terrible to use, just an FYI. So if you're gonna get into it, let me give you a little tutorial. It's not easy. Other sections, we're gonna ask you for, you know, some justification, some history. If it's a trust fund project, natural resources is a whole page, and we're gonna ask you to justify that. I don't want to see a bird list that you printed off the internet, but do you have a wildlife biologist or a natural features inventory, or somehow have you been able to document that you have, you know, beautiful communities? Yeah, you can go ahead. So these are required attachments. I won't go through them. You can just, yeah, the one important thing is the site plan. So I wanted to see what you propose to do on the site plan, and it doesn't have to be a fancy engineered drawing. It can be hand drawn over a overlay on a satellite, you know, imagery.
But like a county with 14 employees is gonna have that and all that. Are they gonna be a preference because
No.
we hand drew it?
No, I just want to see what's existing, what's proposed, and I want to make sure it matches your application that says I want to do benches in a playground and a pavilion. I want to find benches, a playground and a pavilion on there.
That makes sense.
Land and water has a lot more requirements, so we'll just leave it at that. If you're interested, we can talk about those, but there's a lot more to do with land and water grants. Optional things, letters of support are scored, not required, encouraged you to have them, permits. We really look for universal accessibility. We talked, you have to meet ADA. We are looking to reward those who exceed it. So that could be more parking than's required, more accessible picnic tables, more benches, things like that. And I think that's really the end of that. My information is the last slide. I encourage you, if you're thinking of things, let's talk about specific ideas.
You can help us as individuals as opposed to these big counties with staffs. You'll help us walk through these things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can we make a copy of that so we've got it for reference?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great. That would
Yeah,
be great.
and then you guys can share it. So I'm assuming you have some things brewing in your head and we don't have time to talk about them, but I'm happy to either remote in or special meeting or just talk with a few of you about
Okay, so you would,
fleshing out some
you would
ideas.
vote in if we wanna get our heads together and have further, that would be
Yep.
great. That would be great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm
Thank you
going,
for taking time. Ed, are you gonna send that to us, that presentation? It was kind of hard.
Yeah, I will. Yep.
Great, good.
I'll get it to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
we will move the items that we did not discuss till next month's meeting. We will adjourn Parks and Recs. Thank everybody.
Everybody have a good
Jeremy.
weekend. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you for driving all the way down.
Sure.
My pleasure. I'm glad it worked
Probably,
out.
probably put up more roadblocks.